This is Jay LaRock from Marlins Park, and this is the Obsolete Gamer Show.
From the OGS studios in Miami, Florida, it's the Obsolete Gamer Show.
I was talking to my now husband at the time when I was 12. He was my first boyfriend. And we were on AIM, which like old school, right? AIM. One night I was talking to him on the phone and I heard shooting in the background, like legit guns shooting. And I was freaking out. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, that's just Counter-Strike. And I was like, Counter-Strike? What is that? So once he told me, I decided, well, I don't want less time with my boyfriend. So my mom took me to the mall, bought me the game because it was rated mature and I was 12. And then I came home and started playing Counter-Strike. My husband taught me how to play, kind of helped me set up controls. And I mean, I had a ball mouse. I mean, I had a terrible computer, but it was so much fun. And that's what started my PC gaming journey.
And now, here are your hosts, J.A. LaRock and Ignacio.
Alright, I'm seriously trying to like eat better, try to be healthier.
I'm healthy, I'm eating pizza.
Yeah, Ignacio's eating pizza. And I'm here, I have this thing full of candy because kids won't come to the door. I don't know why. And okay.
Aren't you gonna move right next to a school, you pedo? And I here look like a fat fuck. Hello?
Maybe I do know why. Maybe I know why. I think that was
Crankle.
I think that was the NSA that did that. Okay, so I got this damn thing.
Of you down there.
That's the bad one now. Look
There's
at
a mugshot of you.
Yeah, it's like look, I'm gonna eject him. Eject. There you go. Eject. Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
I kicked him out. Look at.
Alright.
I'm gonna start again. Alright, I'll try to eat healthy. And we have Ignacio here eating pizza.
Yeah, and I look like Jabba the Hutt.
And I got this staring at me, still full of candy because kids didn't come by. I didn't want them to come by, but I want to get rid of this candy, and I should have just put it out front and let them just ransack it.
Like squirrels and shit?
Yeah, because it's here now, and it's haunting me. And it really hurts to have this here because I really don't want to eat it. But it has some.
Look, admit it. You bought the candy. Oh look, it's Halloween. Let me buy more candy.
And then you go out.
Like the lights are off, the shades are fucking drawn. Oh, no, I guess they don't want any. I guess somebody's gonna have to eat it.
It's like back in the day when you would go and you would buy like 3 hamburgers, 2 fries, and the Diet Coke because you were fronting. And then you would go into the parking lot way in the back and try and hide, and you'd be there with the bag, and you'd be like,
this is a personal story. This isn't like made up. This is like
that's the dark shit that I would tell at my AA meetings.
My precious.
My precious. And now I got this thing laughing at me.
Trick or treat, motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what the Obsolete Gamer Show has become in between the interviews, because the interviews now, we're trying to be like all nice for our guests, but this is what we do to be crazy in between that.
Yeah, we're only professional in interviews. We don't give a shit the rest of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Jay LaRock, and obviously Ignacio there enjoying his pizza. I hope you choke on that pizza, and then. But then I hope you survive because
chicken.
Right, only choke a little because you need to continue paying for things. So just a little choke. So a lot of things have been happening in gaming, and I'm not going to talk about them because that's what other shows are for.
Wow.
So this is what I'm going to talk about because we were contacted by Chipotle. Speaking of food that's bad for you,
Dude.
And,
Dude, you're supposed to be promoting them.
I am promoting them.
You
Okay.
asshole.
I am promoting them. They contacted us and they said, "Hey, we want you to talk about this game called Chipotle Taste Invaders," and we are going to talk about them.
All right.
And because I played the game, and guess what? It's a ripoff of Space Invaders, Taste Invaders, Space Invaders. So look, we're talking about the game. Contract is achieved, and
Review. It's a ripoff of
it,
Space Invaders. Next.
yes. So instead of the spaceship, it's a burrito, and it kind of looks like a blunt
Yeah.
on its side.
Yeah.
And you know, the little bases are chipotles, which is it's kind of funny because they blow up, which is kind of like akin to all the chipotles that are closing down because of the E. coli scare.
Dude, that is some
And
political shit right there.
yeah, it's kind of like subliminal there. And you're shooting down all the preservatives and bad things that are in other foods, and like, you know, the spaceship that flies overhead in
Yeah.
Space Invaders. Well, instead you're shooting like subs, pizzas, and hamburgers.
Oh my god.
You should be like shooting down E. coli,
Son of a
but you know,
bitch. Dude. I thought you were gonna say they're shooting down oranges, apples, you know, like healthy shit.
yeah. Well, no. So now, see, I was ignorant because when I first received this, I was just like, oh, okay. Because and here's the funny thing. They were like, hey, so review this, and I'll send you. You know, they'll send us these coupons for
You
burritos, and
fucking ass.
I like Chipotle. I was like, that's good. You know, I
I like
don't need.
Chipotle and I like trollings.
Right. I was like, I don't need any Chipotle away. I'm cool with it. So I was
Oh
like,
god.
sure. And I you know, I don't mind knockoffs. So I was like, sure, it's a Space Invaders knockoff. But that's cool. You know, I understand it. So look, first just check out this gameplay real quick. All right. So you see, clearly a knockoff, right? And I was actually pretty good at it, right? I mean, usually I suck, but I was actually good at shooting down the E. coli.
Yeah.
And so I got it, and then I was like telling Nasio about it, and I went out and I was hanging with some friends, and I was telling them about this game, and they're like, "Hey, so they're probably doing that for positive spin." And I'm like, "Positive spin about what?" And they're like, "E. coli." I was like, "What?" So I got some information here, and I was like, "Oh, in the last 3 months, Chipotle has caused 3 major outbreaks of foodborne illnesses, first spreading salmonella to 100 California residents in August, and then to additional 64 customers in Minnesota this September. And just this week, an E. coli outbreak was traced back to the chain, sickening 37 people in Washington and Oregon. As a result, the company is being sued for $75,000 with claims of negligence regarding the E. coli case." So I was like, and this is like news. And I was like, uh-oh. So I'm like, wait, I'm gonna get this. I mean, like, we're here in Florida. I like Chipotle. I never knew that they were having this stuff. Is that because there's no preservatives in it that you can have these outbreaks? I like Chipotle. I really, really like Chipotle. And now I find out that this is why we have to shoot down things in a copy
You
of Space
you
Invaders
mean
and this.
you mean this?
Wait, did Burger King contact you?
Shh! Hey!
Oh,
Somebody's gonna
see?
pay these bills, bro.
Oh man, that ain't right, man.
I
Oh, see
ambushed
that,
you right there. See? Game over.
man. See, all right,
Hold
look.
on. It's gonna be facing the. There we go.
Wait a minute, you have pizza and Burger King?
It's complicated.
Dude, we're going to the TigerDirect thing tonight. Well, you're gonna have to do laps around Marlins Park, like laps, bro.
For me, a lap is standing up.
All right. Okay, so look, Chipotle, you're probably pissed. Look, you're probably not watching this. If you watch this, you're probably pissed. Don't
What?
send me don't send us stuff thinking that, oh, these are like dumb gamers. Look, we're gonna look stuff up. I'm gonna look up stuff. Don't do that, okay? Because
It's your propaganda machine.
yeah, because sometimes it backfires, and you know, if you didn't send those, I'm still gonna use those coupons. I'm gonna wait till this thing blows over. Hopefully, it blows over.
Good.
But I'm gonna hold on to those coupons.
You
I bet
better
they have
use them before
expiration
they
date.
shut down your local.
Yeah, right. Watch, it has like an expiration date of like a week or something. If you do that, the next show I'm gonna shit on you even more. So don't do that. You saw what we did to Sony with
Jimmy
the DC
Kimmel?
Online stuff. Remember? Oh, and Jimmy Kimmel. Saw what we did to Jimmy Kimmel with a motherfucking potato.
They give him a potato.
Don't make me go into a rant. I'ma calm down. Cause
Oh my god, I know what to get you for Christmas.
yeah, all right.
Like
Look,
a
we could
potato.
we could chill. We got something else here because we were talking about healthy stuff, and so we have some great people. Look, we have Snack Nation. All right, Snack Nation. This is a company that's cool. All right, because we were talking about how, you know, we are trying to be healthy. At least I'm trying to be healthy. Two big guys. I don't know
I'm healthy.
here. Yeah, pizza and Burger King. Right. All
If
right,
I'm
look.
breathing, I'm healthy.
So Snack Nation. Here, we're gonna give a plug. Snack Nation. There you go. You can see it.
Okay, but tell them what it's about.
And all right, so these guys offer healthy snacks to like businesses. So if you guys out there have like small business, medium businesses, large businesses, and you guys usually have like potato chips, unhealthy snacks and stuff like that, these guys offer like healthy alternatives so that you guys can not be like bloated
Us.
and big. Oh, yes, there you go. I tried to like work around it, but granted, with your
Us.
pizzas, fine. Us. All right, us.
Join us.
All right. So they're like, okay, you know, we'll send you over some snacks. So I haven't even opened this yet. It's been sitting here in the office, and I was like, I'm gonna wait to open this up. So let's see what we got in here. All right. So I mean, oh, this is cool. Like, you know, they got like a Buddha bowl here, a popcorn. And this is cool, like 100 calories, only 4 grams of fat, 3 grams of salt, 5 grams of fiber. I mean, that's cool. You know, you got like popcorn, we got barbecue crisps, sea salt and vinegar chips.
Oh, nice.
Ooh,
I
man.
want that one.
Ooh, wasabi ranch. We got some snap peas here. I like that. A lot of chips here. Wow, I don't even quinoa chips. Never heard of that. Look at that. That's some good stuff. I mean, oh look, sweet chipotle. the kind that won't give you diseases. I mean, like, this is all types of like.
God damn
I
it!
mean,
Don't sue us, you motherfucker.
I mean, all these are like. I mean, it's cool. Like crispy cheddar crackers. It's not like your regular
Yeah.
crackers that just like kill you. I mean, toasted coconut chips, 115 calories. I mean, that's cool. Hey, look. I mean, like, look. These are like non-GMO corn cheese puffs. I mean, 150 calories. But the thing is like these are supposed to be like natural and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
also they have like coconut oatmeal bites.
Oh man.
And you know, pistachios, 100 calories for that.
It's a
Cliff
good
bars.
idea. Good
I mean,
idea.
it's cool. So, you know, in the end, nice big box of stuff that they sent over. And I mean, look, yeah, it's a plug, but it's cool. They tell you like, obviously, it's also a selling thing, so it's not like we're gonna tell you it's free or nothing like that. They're gonna try and tell you like, oh, you want to purchase a certain amount for your company, but obviously everyone's trying to get a little bit healthier. So at least it's good to know that if you are out there and you're trying to eat healthier, when we talked to Fatality, remember he was talking about out there and eat all this
Oh no,
Cheetos
no,
and
no.
soda. Like it's not the thing that you see all the time on gamers just eating that stuff. He would eat this healthy stuff before a game because he
Yeah,
didn't want to be all sluggish and stuff. So you don't always have to sit around while you're playing games just stuffing your face with candy. Especially if you want to be on your game. So that was kind of cool of Snack Nation to send us over that stuff. So, you got the one side and you got the other side. So you know what, Ignacio,
yeah.
you enjoy that pizza. I'm gonna have me some of this food over here. How about that?
Well, okay. Now the thing is, okay, don't fucking eat all of that shit at once because that's meant for novels.
No. Yeah. Obviously.
Okay, if you have a business, get that stuff. Because then on top of that, if you have some fat bastards like us, that's just like, oh look, a whole box of. Let me just eat the whole box. You won't do that when you're at work. You're gonna be like, you know what? I'll take the little pistachio thing and you know. You won't be like, all right, I'm gonna take the pistachio one hand and I'm gonna take the cookies in the other hand, and well,
Yeah,
you can use your imagination.
This is not a lunchbox.
Yeah, exactly. That's supposed to be for a company to having like their lunch room for like maybe for like half a week for it to be consumed by multiple employees. Unless you're like us, that's like, hey, look, somebody left a bunch of shit here. We take it back to our cubicle.
Speaking of that, I remember when I was out in LA, they actually there's a trail where outside the trail they actually had like a box with like bananas, they had like trail mix like wrapped and stuff like that, and like power bars, and it said, oh, take one and leave a donation based on what you think is fair. And I was thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like who's gonna do that? And there was stuff there and people actually put money in the jar and didn't steal it. I'm like,
yeah,
what planet am I on? If that was in Miami, everything would have been gone. The box would have been bite marks in the wood.
There would have been not even payment left.
Jeez. All right, so do you know what a game book is, Ignacio?
Sort of.
I had to look it up. So a game book is like a work of fiction, electronic thing where, you have like a story. Like it's kind of like a playable choose your own adventure book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's usually you take like someone's work of like it's based on like either a novel or sometimes people like write their own story, and like you play characters and you play it out. So it's like a video game mixed with a story, and you put together. It's almost like also playing like a board game all mixed into one, and it's really cool. And we got to interview Richard Morgan, who wrote the series A Land Fit for Heroes, and it's part of a three-part trilogy. And it's really cool because, like I'm into writing. I've written stuff before, nothing that's been like published like that. But just to be able to talk about just the aspect of writing, like where do you get that, that spark to be able to put something out. And his game book came out just this week, and you can get it like on Amazon, you can get iTunes, you can get on Google Play, and soon you'll be able to get on Steam. So you can get Land Fit for Heroes, and basically what happens is it's a unique cooperative multiplayer game book, and you can play as 3 distinct characters. And like this is like dark and gloomy stuff. Like it isn't like your normal shining knight character.
Yeah.
Like these people, like all the choices that you make, it's like one choice is bad, the other choice is just a little bit less bad. It's like, do I stab this guy in the neck, or do I stab this guy in the heart? I mean, it's those type of choices.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really cool. I didn't get to read the series yet, but these are the type of things where you play the game, and next thing you know, you're like, wow. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like almost when you see something like a Telltale series. Like there's some people who didn't play even like with Walking Dead. Like I know some people that played Walking Dead and then they went to watch the series, or people who read Harry Potter. They were like, oh man, I never read books before. They read Harry Potter, now they read all types of books. That's the same thing with like
Yeah.
a game book. You know, these are one of those things where you start to play, and the next thing you say, man, now I've played this, which is its own distinct story based on the world. So, you know, being able to talk to him and find out, you know, how he was able to, well, his team was able to transfer this over was really a good experience. So check out this interview with Richard Morgan, and we'll be back in just a minute. A Land Fit for Heroes, the game book, it's out already. You can get it on Google Play. You can also find it on iTunes for the iPad, iTouch. Also, it's going to be coming later on for Christmas to Steam, Windows PC, Kindle Fire, things like that. And we're joined today by Richard Morgan. Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
My pleasure.
So, you know, there's a lot of questions I have, and I know that I want to keep it compact. So I just want to start off, if I may, with the beginning. Being that you've written for, you know, video games, your incredible novels, as well as comics, you know, there must have been like that spark, you know, in the beginning, that starting off point that I guess a lot of people have when they know, hey, there's just something that I really want to do. What was that moment, I guess, when you were young that said, hey, I really want to be a writer. I really want to do this for a living?
To be honest with you, there may well have been, but if there was, it's too far back for me to remember. I mean, the way I always answer this question is to say that J.K. Rowling answered it best, actually, in an interview I saw with her, where she said, all my life I wanted to be a writer. As soon as I understood as a child, as soon as I knew that there were such people as writers, people who made their living from telling stories, writing stories, that's what I wanted to do. And that pretty much covers it for me. I mean, that's, you know, I can't remember a time before I knew that. And I do have a clear memory, age about 11, in a classroom, of saying to some of my classroom friends, saying, you know, when I'm grown up, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write stories and get paid for it, you know. And they all said, I had no chance. But that was, I mean, that, I think, you know, to that extent, there was no real initial spark with the idea of being a writer. I think one spark I do very clearly remember is back in the late 70s, early 80s, reading the short stories that William Gibson was getting published in Omni magazine, particularly Johnny Mnemonic and Burning Chrome. There were a couple of others as well, but those two really stuck in my mind. And I remember I read these short stories, and there was a kind of explosion in the back of my head. I went, that's what I want to be writing. Because I'd been a sci-fi fan for a long time. I'd been reading all sorts of science fiction all my life, and I guess I'd always assumed I would write science fiction. But then later on in my teens, I started reading crime fiction as well. And I really got into the whole noir dynamic. And of course, Gibson comes along and he molds those two together and gives you this sort of very noirish feel, but at the same time he's talking about the future. And that just absolutely blew up in my head. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do. And that one is very clear. That is a very clear spot. And I think, to be honest, I went on batting off that probably more or less until I got published. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you started writing, like, is that something where when you begin the process, was it like a challenge to where you start writing and you feel it inside, but you realize that there was a lot that you had to do before you reach that next step where you say, okay, this is now ready to take that next step? Or did it just come naturally to you?
I think I was a bit oblivious as a kid and a teenager and even as a younger man. And so I kind of, I don't think it ever occurred to me that maybe, you know, I wasn't good enough. I mean, I look back now and I realize that a lot of the rejections that I got early on in my career were just about that. It was the fact that I just wasn't good enough. You know, people wrote back to me saying, oh, you know, you clearly have writing talent. Try us with something else. Try us next time. So, yeah, I mean, I think I never really bought into that. That was the problem. This is why I spent 14 years not getting published, because there's a kind of refusal to, you know, to accept that or to see it. But over time, obviously, without actually consciously accepting it, I obviously must have been unconsciously refining my craft, you know, honing the style, working at it, getting better and better at it. And you sort of evolve over time like that anyway. So I wasn't conscious at any point of saying to myself, oh dear, you've got to skill up, you know. But clearly I did. And And at some point, I skilled up sufficiently to be doing the work. Of course, the other thing is that the zeitgeist changed quite a lot. I mean, when I was submitting back in the late 80s, early 90s, it's a very different time back then. It was nowhere near as dark in terms, entertainment was nowhere near as dark and gritty as it is now. And I think what I was writing in that sense, I mean, this is no apology for that. I'm sure it was an issue of skill as well. But I think there was also the factor that no one really wanted to read what I was writing. I remember getting rejections of people saying things like, yeah, this was a very interesting story. I couldn't identify with any of these obnoxious characters. And that was in a story that later became my novel Market Forces. And the whole point of that novel is that the characters are obnoxious. So I think some of it was zeitgeist as well. Some of it was, the times came around and people suddenly started to actually get a taste for this much darker storytelling. You could see it in TV as well, from the 90s when The Sopranos suddenly took off and that whole HBO thing. There was a realization that you could make drama that was very human, where there weren't really any good guys or bad guys. And this was something, I mean, that was quite fresh. I think people don't remember back before The Sopranos, quite how barren the TV landscape was in terms of decent drama, and also quite how squeaky clean stories tended to be, even in, especially in Hollywood. So that changed, the zeitgeist changed, and at the same time, I was getting better at what I did, and clearly I was taking on influence from all of this as well. I mean, the more you read, the more you learn to write as well. So I picked up stuff as I was going along. I was reading more and more interesting stuff, more and more widely, and then serendipity. The zeitgeist collided with the amount of skill I'd managed to acquire, and boom.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, especially when you talk to when we talk to like people who have written books, sometimes you hear people who say, "Oh, I write novels, I write this specific thing," and then you hear them talk about either television screenwriting, or hear them talk about other mediums, and sometimes you hear them say things like, "Oh, no, I only write this." I was just wondering, with your experience, writing in games like Crisis 2, Syndicate, things like that, what was it making that transition? What was it like writing the narrative for something like that, the behind the scenes? Because was it, strange or a transition making that being, a novelist, or was it just simple? Was it like, hey, this is a story, it's the same thing for me? Because some people say, hey, I can't write for these other mediums because I write only for this. This is my mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think working across media does require a reset. You can't walk into game writing with the attitude of a novelist. You have to switch a little bit, And the same if you're going to do comic book work. The same if you're going to do screenplays. There's a skill set involved with each, and there are sets of emphasis that vary, that depending upon what the medium is. But the truth of the matter is, it's all pretty transferable. It's not hard to learn the terrain, if you're prepared to. And I think what it really comes down to is a certain amount of humility. You've got to be able to step into a new arena and go, right, I don't really know much about this, and then allow yourself to learn. So I think the big stumbling block there for any writer would be arrogance, or maybe not even arrogance, maybe not as bad as arrogance, just stubbornness, custom. The refusal to. I mean, when I started writing for games, I was told, quite a few people who I was working with told me that they had problems with writers, very often screenwriters, who had stepped across, because that was perceived as an easy match. That screenwriting is not so different to game writing, but it actually is in quite a few ways. And they said that the problem was that very often these people brought with them the assumptions from the work that they normally did, and those assumptions just didn't fit. So I mean, one of the obvious things for gaming is that the story is actually a kind of underpinning framework to support the gameplay. When you play a game, it's great to have good story. So take something like The Last of Us, fantastic storytelling in a game. But the point was that what really made that game work was that it meshed very well with the gameplay. Now, it doesn't matter how good your story is, if the story gets in the way of your game, of the game dynamics, then it's not a good story for a game. And I think a lot of the people who came over from screenwriting didn't get that. For them, they thought it was all about the story. And obviously, if someone came to them from the gameplay design side of it and said, "Oh, look, we need to change this because it doesn't fit the game dynamic," they got very short shrift and they were told, oh, but this is my story. And you had to, obviously, you had to be flexible. I was lucky because I was a crazy enthusiastic gamer by the time I got invited to work on games. I'd been playing for a while, quite selectively, but I was very enthusiastic about it. So I came aboard with an enthusiasm for the work. When Electronic Arts said to me, hey, would you like to help us with some games? I was like, yeah, that'd be fantastic because I like games. And so that's part of it as well. I think it's problematic if you're coming across into a medium that you, A, don't know anything about, but B, also maybe don't want to know anything about. If someone says to you, your agent says, look, I can get you a big fat paycheck if you're prepared to write for this game, but you don't really play games or know anything about them or even want to know anything about them, clearly that's not going to be a good place to start from. I was already big into games when I got the call. So for me, it was easy. I came across and I was going, yeah, I'd love to do some games because I love games, and I'd love to be behind a game that a game that's really fun to play. So yeah, it's about upskill. It's about unlearning old modes of work and then being prepared to take on board the new stuff. And that applies right the way across the board. But what I would say to anyone aspiring as a writer now is don't limit yourself. If you're a writer, a storyteller, you can tell stories in any medium you like. It just requires a certain amount of flexibility, if you like. And it would be a shame to miss out because you only focused on the one thing.
Yeah, speaking to aspiring writers, looking over your bio with the things that you've done, traveling the world, being a tutor at university, I mean, all the things that you've done, your experience and stuff like that. A lot of times I've heard that with writing, like even for younger people who have seen things like Californication, David Duchovny's character talks about, you have to have that experience. Writing comes from pain, experience, stuff like that. If you're like young and maybe you haven't had that, especially nowadays where you're so attached to your phones or computers, do you think that you have to be older, travel the world, see things, or maybe you can just have that experience even if you're just seeing things visually from your experiences from home, from what you experience with your friends? Like, what would you tell to those people, younger people that maybe they won't get to see the world that much, maybe just a little vacation here and there?
Well, I think there are a couple of things to say to that. I mean, the first thing is that, having lots of experience and pouring it into your writing is no guarantee of success. And conversely, success is no guarantee that you're writing especially well. I mean, you could take something like the Aragorn series. Those were written by a guy in his early teens when he started. He clearly had zero experience of the world. And what he was really doing was transposing his own love of certain stories that he'd already read. But it was massively, massively successful. He tapped into something. He found, a common nerve that millions of people loved. And those books did very, very well. So that's the first thing to say, that, there's the issue of becoming, a good textured writer. And then there's the issue of becoming a successful writer. Those two things are not necessarily the same. And I say, especially now that YA fiction is so big, I'd say it's eminently possible for a young writer to become very successful without necessarily having gone out and lived a huge amount in the world. I don't think it makes for especially good writing, but that who's to say? It's ultimately most people want to make a living from their writing, and to say that's certainly possible without having spent 10 or 15 years of bashing your head against the sharp corners of the world. Then I think the second thing to say about that really is that experience is a funny thing, and you won't necessarily use it directly. I mean, I spent 14 years as an EFL teacher, but I didn't actually write about EFL as a profession. I didn't write about teachers and students, for example. So, the old story of write what you know, that's complete bullshit. There is no need to do that. You should write what motivates you. You should write what lights your fire, if you like, write what drives you. And obviously you lay your hands on what you can to make that work. If you've had a lot of experience, if you have lived a lot out in the world and seen a lot of things, well, that's great, because you can pour that into your fiction. It will texture it. But if you haven't, I think it's the passion that will carry you rather than the experience. The experience is a useful tool along the way, but it's the passion that will carry you. And the other thing, of course, is that experience in itself is a funny thing, because yeah, I've done a lot of traveling and I've spent time with people from all sorts of different cultures and places around the world, and that's a kind of experience. But similarly, if you grew up in a hard-scrabble working-class neighborhood in an inner city like Detroit or Glasgow, say, you could easily, by the age of 25, have had a lifetime full of very interesting experience right there. Experience doesn't necessarily require you to get on a plane. It very often starts right outside your front door, or even in your own home. So, and a lot of writers have done very well out of that as well. I mean, look at Jonathan Franzen. I mean, most of what he writes is very close to home. It's very much stuff that are going on around him in a very normal context. So it depends what kind of thing you're going to write as well. If you want to write, Ian Fleming-esque type adventure stories, then it helps to have done a bit of traveling, because that will color up your storytelling. But on the other hand, if you're planning to write a story that is about urban angst, well, if you live in a city, that urban angst is right there for the taking. So all depends. You can't really give really very general meters for something as broad as writing, because it's such a broad church. It carries so many different, what kind of writing, what genre, for what audience. All these things apply, and they will, those will mean that there are different answers to that issue of experience depending on where you are on the map.
When you're creating something like any type of world, but especially when you're going in with a series, so with a Land Fit for Heroes, when you're creating like just a world with characters so huge, and then you're trying to transfer it to a digital realm and then to the game book, was it like a daunting task to make such a transition, to bring it down, to put it into a context where it would fit into that for people to be able to absorb?
Sorry, to transfer it into the game book format you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, a lot of that work was not done by me. It was done by the guys at Narborian and SagaScribe, who, they're the ones who have the skills. When they approached me in the first place, I did say to them, look, you are going to have to do the bulk of the writing here, because I don't know what this is, and I don't have the time to skill up. I've got deadlines and things. So they were fine with that. And what happened was, most of the writing was done by the guys at SagaScribe, and I came in and I provided some sort of finishes on certain scenes, especially scenes where my characters from the novels actually sort of move through the game book's space. So I would come in and do a little bit of writing there, and then we had a lot of consulting to make sure that the continuity fitted. That the world that I'd invented was actually, they weren't doing things in the game book that didn't fit in with that world. So it will be a case of, no, look, you can't have him riding a camel because there aren't any camels in that part of the world. Things like that. And it wasn't hard. It was, in a way, it was exhilarating. I mean, it was fun, because I'd spent 6 years or more, 7 or 8 years, I suppose, creating the world that these 3 books took place in. And here had a bunch of guys had come along and said to me, oh, we would really like to play in your world, can we? So that was brilliant. I mean, I basically just, it was a case of sitting down with them and going, yeah, let's play, let's set up the pieces and see what we can do with them. So yeah, I mean, there was a process there. There was the work of sort of transforming, things into workable tools within the game book space. It's a different kind of space to an ordinary novel, clearly. But I wouldn't have said that it was a challenge, especially because it was actually a huge amount of fun.
And that's the thing of, like, when you do something like this, you can bring people in, to something that may have not seen. So if people have not read the novels, they may come and see the game book and they're like, oh, this is cool, and then they'll get into it, because there's people that, before, like, I know, like with when you mentioned J.K. Rowling, there's people that never was like, oh, I'm not interested in reading books, and then next thing you know, they see Harry Potter and they read Harry Potter, and yes, some people did stop there, but now they're like, hey, let me read something else. I know some people that read Halo, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to read other things. Yeah. For people who perhaps maybe have not read your novels and now they play the game book and they're like, hey, yes, this story is different, it's not directly connected, but they say, hey, I like this world. Did you say to yourself, guys, I want to be able to have something where they'll want to connect and maybe go to novels? Or was this like, hey, I just want to put this together so it stands alone?
I think what it was nice to have, there are the stories in the game book run parallel to the narrative that's in the trilogy. So, and there's a tiny bit of crossover in the sense that the characters from the trilogy do crop up. They have like sort of cameo roles in the game book. And And also what happens in the game book is shown, you can see in retrospect that it's having an impact upon what happened in the trilogy. So there are links, if you like, but you don't need to have read the trilogy first. I mean, the game book makes perfect sense without it. I think what was fun for me was the ability to just sort of put in hints, to just sort of gesture at something and have tiny little fragments of the novel's storyline and characters and context, have those sprinkled on like a kind of seasoning, so that someone who's never read the trilogy is not going to at the time get anything specific from that. People who have read the trilogy are going to be going through the game book and they're going, I know what that really means. And I kind of like that. I like that sort of Easter egg dynamic, if you like. I think I find that very enjoyable. I'm playing Shadow of Mordor at the moment, and it's quite fun seeing the little references back to Lord of the Rings and to The Hobbit and so forth. And yeah, there's a pleasure to be derived from that, a pleasure to, aha, I recognize that, you know. So I wanted that, yes, because I think that's a genuine pleasure. One of the pleasures of, you know, any kind of entertainment is when you get a flash glimpse of something you already know, you know. It's a similar kind of thing to when you're seeing a movie that's set in a historical period, but maybe doesn't deal directly with the historical figures, but then you suddenly get a walk on part. So maybe it's a movie about something going on during the Civil War period, and then Abraham Lincoln kind of drifts across backstage for a moment, and you're just like, I know who that is. You know, there's a genuine pleasure to be derived from that kind of thing, and I wanted that in this. I wanted the game books for people to sort of blink and go, yeah, that's because that's that guy, and you know, but I wasn't in. It didn't feel I needed to link it, you know, very, very directly back. You know, if people finish the game book and go, God, I'd love to read the stories. Well, obviously that's great. I'd be delighted, you know, and even more delighted if they actually, you know, read them and then really love them. But you know, that's not a major concern, if you like. That's the icing on the cake. That wasn't what this was about. I think for me it was just a case of, right, we're using the world, we're using the assumptions of the fictionscape I've built, and let's just make this into the sort of the most dynamic and fun experience we can on this platform as a game book.
Sometimes when you look, especially when you go deep into people who are really into holding the physical book, you know, I've talked to people who just, you know, that's all they want. They said, hey, I don't even want to have it on my phone. I don't want to have it on my iPad or on a Kindle or anything like that. And it's kind of interesting because when I started, you know, writing and practicing, that's all I used. You have some people that say, I'm going to use a typewriter. I don't even want to use a computer. So It's kind of strange when you start to talk to people like that. And I respect all that, even though I could never use a typewriter because, man, with all my typing. But I always wondered, like, when you talk to people who, you know, have had things published and they've really gone into a work, do you think that there can be a disconnect whether you're writing something for a physical book that you hold in your hand, when people talk about that curled up with a good book feel, or when you transfer it to something on an iPad, or even if you have it in a game book? Do you think that it's possible that some people have a right to say that something is lost? Because I think as gamers, and you writing you know, narratives for games, can see that perhaps, hey, when you play these games, you can get just into it, whether it's a game on an iPad or if it's a game on a PC. Do you think that it doesn't matter? You can still have that same connection whether you're playing on one device or you're holding it in your hands on a book, physical book?
Well, I mean, there's, you know, I think it would be disingenuous to kind of pretend that there's no difference, because there is clearly. What you get out of as you say, curling up and with a good book and just reading a novel, immersing yourself in it, is very different to the kind of experience that you're going to have playing a game book on a tablet or an iPhone. But I have a feeling that there are some things that are congruent in both cases. You know, I have a feeling that there are things that are transferable right the way across all forms of fiction. In fact, you know, a game is different than a movie, is different than a comic book, is different than a game book, is different than a novel, clearly. But I think in all cases, certain people, not all of the you know, the public that it's aimed at, I think there is a desire for immersion. I think people love to get lost in fiction. They love to get lost in a fictionscape, you know, and that will happen in different ways depending on the thing that you're doing. So the way you get lost in a book is very different than the way you get lost in a movie, for example. You know, the way you get lost in a movie is very different than the way you get lost in a game, and so on. So with the game book, you'll have a bit of the reading experience in the sense that the story is prose driven, but you're reading a narrative in the same way. So yes, you lose yourself in the narrative to that extent. But then the fact that game books are not the old choose your own adventure paperbacks. There's so much more involved. You know, you've got the role-based combat every time you're up against some bad guys. You actually go to a screen that has that combat on it. There's the fact that you've got your backpack of items and you can buy items and so forth. There are elements in it that are very gamey that belong much more to the gaming arena. But that doesn't mean they're not fun. You know, I think, again, if you go to a game book expecting a novel, you're going to be disappointed, clearly, in the same way that if you go to a film expecting a novel, you're going to be disappointed. You know, however, if you go to it accepting that it's a different medium and it works in different ways, I think you can still have that immersive experience, that experience of stepping into a fiction and kind of forgetting yourself. You know, again, going back to Shadow of Mordor, which I'm obsessively playing at the moment. You know, it is a game. There's no question. In terms of the narrative, you know, if anything, the narrative is slightly weak, I would say, but it's very powerfully immersive. You immerse yourself in that world, and you do disappear inside it in a very similar way to the way you disappear inside a good novel or a good movie. But clearly, you're playing a game, and that is different. So I think, sure, they are different, and so you can't expect that the way you get your payoff will be the same. It won't. It will be a different experience in that respect. But I think the payoff of immersion, of sinking into a fiction and losing yourself there, I think that's possible right the way across all these media.
Well, definitely with Choose Your Own Adventure books, I loved it as a kid just because you had that was the first experience that I had where you actually could have a bad ending. Because before that, I was reading books where it was all good, and you would read a book where you didn't necessarily have like a kid get decapitated, but it'd be like, oh, you were trapped in a ship and you slept and you were drifting into space forever. With the game book, a lot of gamers talk about how choice was important, especially when they talked about like Mass Effect. There was a big controversy back in the day where you would make a choice and in the end they said, oh, the choice didn't really matter. How did you go about making sure that the choices really mattered in the game book, especially when you think about the characters, their backstories, especially some of the horrific things that happen to these characters? So you do care about what happened to them and then their choices, so you want to make sure that their choices really mattered.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, there are certainly, in this game book, there are choices that will have significant impacts. I mean, one of the things is you can actually choose the sexuality of your characters. And I say there's the fact that it's a multiplayer. There's a multiplayer option as well, so you can play single player. You can read the entire book, or you can choose to play multiplayer, in which case you only read the narrative section of one chosen character, and you'll have two friends who either close by or somewhere else on the planet who will read the other threads, the other narrative threads, and the three of you will have to make decisions about what you do at each stage. Do we reread this bit, or do we just push on? Which choices shall we make, and so forth. So that, to that extent alone, it's significant that the choice element is significant. But also, you will have very different experiences from these choices. Including, if you make a significantly bad choice, you can find yourself dead. End of game. You have to go back and start right from scratch again. Or you could bookmark it, but I kind of think that's cheating. So I mean, there's no question that, say, the choices are significant and will have real effects upon you. That said, it does have a coherent story, and the story does come to a coherent end. So you'll arrive at that end, allowing that you haven't killed yourself off somewhere along the way. You will arrive at that same ending, simply because I think it's inevitable if you're going to tell a good story. I think within the game community, especially, I think there is a bit of schizophrenia about this, because there's a sort of the desire for the perfect sandbox, an area in which everything is choice and you can make any choice you like, and totally branching narrative. It just that is. First of all, at the moment, we don't have the tech to do that. But also, even if that were possible, then that isn't really a story. That's not storytelling. That's something else. That's playing in a sandbox. And I think where game books are concerned, you have to have a story. Otherwise, the issue of it being a game book, really evaporates. So, and I think, to be honest with you, I think the best stories that I've seen told in games usually shepherd quite strongly. They because they need you to get to certain emotional payoff points in the narrative. Because if you don't, you're going to miss out on what the story is delivering. I mean, again, Last of Us is an interesting point. It's been given all of these plaudits for telling a fantastic story in game and really engaging you with the characters. Part of that has been you have to give up your agency to some extent, because if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't be able to have these emotional payoffs that the story delivers, because half the people who are playing the game wouldn't do it. They'd make a different choice and you wouldn't get that payoff. So I think there has to be, I think people have to understand, especially if they're coming from the gaming side of this, that there is gameplay in an arena, in a sandbox, and then there is story. And those two things, although you can sort of float them over each other and you can intertwine them, ultimately, if you want to be told a story, if you want there to be a coherent story running through the experience, that has to be shepherded to some extent, you know, and that will certainly be the experience here. You will arrive at an ending, allowing that you manage to avoid the pitfalls, don't get yourself killed along the way, then you will arrive at an ending, and that ending is set. You will be, but how you get there and what you do along the way is very significant. Say your relationships with other characters will vary depending on choices that you make, and they say depending on how you set your character up at the beginning of the experience. You know, so yeah, choice is important. Choice will definitely have an impact, and choice will texture your experience, if you like. But that said, there is a story to be told, and in order to tell that story, we have to have obviously lock down a certain amount of the experience.
And I was checking out the art in the trailer, and it looks really awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
No, actually, I don't know. I mean, again, that's something that the guys at Saga Scribe, they handled that side of things. And basically, what they did was they just sent me stuff and said, you know, what do you think about this? And they sent me these ones, and I was looking at them and just going, man, that is awesome. It's really, you know, it's got this lovely grainy feel to it, and it sort of it stands somewhere between a comic book feel and a you know, a sort of a realistic texture. It's really, really nice. And then, to say, I was seeing these things clearly as just, you know, things being emailed through to me as attachments. Then later on, I got to actually sit down with these guys and go through sections of the game on a tablet. And when you actually see it in situ, you see it actually come to life with, you know, the graphical interface and all the various bits and pieces of it, you know. And it's just awesome what they've done. I mean, this kind of, you know, because the two things that I guess have defined this trilogy right from the start, my own books, you know, were Blood and Steel. You know, those were the two things, and they absolutely nailed that. You know, the artwork guys, they I don't know if they read the books, but they absolutely got those two. And so you've got this kind of, you know, blood smeared on metal kind of effect. And then I say all of the imagery, the artwork images, they're slightly blurry around the edges, and there's this feel of sort of mess about it. And it absolutely nails the spirit of the thing. It really does.
I gotta say, I think that one of the best things in the world is like you ask a question and the best answer is like, hey, do you know about this art? No. Don't even, like, that's the best thing I learned. Like, don't try and guess. Just no, I don't really. They said to me it looks awesome.
Yeah.
That's perfect. All right, I got one last question, because you mentioned, you know, your love of games and stuff, and I figure if you love the games, it probably came from a classic roots. An Obsolete Gamer, you know, especially in the past, we did a lot of classic gaming stuff. Was there games back in the day that you played, like what would be considered vintage, classic, retro gaming? Was there like games that you really liked back in the day?
Well, yeah, but I don't know, you know, retro's a bit of a movable thing, isn't it? I mean, I didn't start gaming until quite late. I mean, I basically, most of my early working life, I was a teacher, and I had not very little disposable income and very little free time. And then when I got published and I went full-time as an author, I suddenly had lots of both. And I started gaming approximately then. So you're talking about late 2002, early 2003. I basically arrived I started gaming just in time to play on the old PS1 and the old Nintendo, the big clunky Nintendo. And then I sort of teched up to a PS2 almost immediately. I mean, I'd only been playing for a few months, and then the PS2s came out. So I only go back that far, so you couldn't talk about the old isometric games or anything like that. But I mean, one game that I still think it's probably the best game I've ever played, even now, and it would look pretty. I mean, especially the graphics, I think, will look pretty shaky these days. It's a game from 2004 called The Suffering. I don't know if you ever played that. Did you?
No, I didn't play that one.
No, that is awesome. You can get it. It's on Steam, and you can find it on the internet in various places, totally free to play. It's survival horror, and it's set in a prison that's clearly modelled very, very loosely on Alcatraz. And it's on an island, which is much bigger than Alcatraz Island. I mean, it's a significantly large island. And basically, you start the game as a convicted killer who's going on death row for the murder of his family. But you have no memory of whether you killed your family or not. And then game starts, all sorts of supernatural shit starts kicking off, and you get out of your prison cell, and you have this very simple imperative: get out of the prison and then get off the island. And what was great about the game, I mean, the monster design was fantastic. The gameplay design was unbelievably fluid. I mean, people said to me, if you like this one, you should try Resident Evil. I tried Resident Evil, I'm going, but this is clunky, man. I'm so hampered. I'm so slow here. Suffering you were totally fluid and dynamic the whole time. And also the great thing was choices, talking about choices. At the end of the game, you get your memory back. So you retrospectively find out what kind of person you are, and how you've played the game will affect that. So if you've behaved like a complete shit, and basically just chop the head off anyone who gets in your way, and just not giving a shit about collateral damage to the NPCs. When you get to the end, you find out, yep, sure enough, you're a piece of shit and you did murder your family. If, on the other hand, you've played really nicely like a gentleman, and you've tried to help people and carried out side quests that will help out the NPCs, then you get the ending that no, you didn't kill your family, you were framed. And then the really interesting one was the ending I got first time around, because I played to be nice and I wasn't good enough to actually manage that. People still got hurt on my watch. You get to the end of that game, and what you find is, no, you didn't kill your family, but the life choices that you made have pretty much ensured that they would die. And that's the most interesting one. But it's a game that it's got everything in it that a novel has got, in the sense that it's got a real sense of theme. It's about the American prison system. It's about violence. It's about race. It's about the death penalty. It's got all of those things in them, and they're in to the depth that you would expect to read in a good popular novel, let's say a Stephen King novel or something. And the horror is really effective. There are some really good black comic moments in it. It's an awesome game, and I still haven't played anything that, where the total bundle is quite as awesome as that. I've played games that have much better graphics, of course. I've played games that have other gameplay dynamics that are very impressive. I've played games where some element or other of the game is way better. But I've still never come across a game that quite bundled everything up so well. So if you ever get a chance to play The Suffering, really, man, don't miss the chance. It is an awesome, awesome game.
A Land Fit for Heroes is available now on the Google Play Store for Android devices. It's also available on the iTunes Apple Store for iPad, iTouch, all the Apple devices, and also on the Amazon for the Kindle Fire. It's going to be available on Steam for Windows PC later for Christmas, so make sure you guys pick it up. Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Real pleasure.
It was awesome.
Thanks very much, Jay. Take care.
Before we let you go, we went over to TigerDirect's Tech Bash 2016 at Marlins Park here in Miami. There were a lot of cool things that we got to see. People showing off their computers, laptops, all types of gadgets coming out this year, coming out next year, things that have already been released. They had computer building contests, a lot of cool stuff. So we put this montage together. Hope you like it. Check it out, and we'll catch you next time on the Obsolete Gamer Show.